All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination to Show, episode 42. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as ever by Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Busy as always, but it's fun to do these things once a week, and the draft is ever approaching, and I'm a fan of drafts, all drafts.
Oh my God.
So this week is fun because I'll spend 2 days following the basketball draft, and then I'll do something crazy and listen to some French names be announced tomorrow for this hockey draft. So yeah, it's a good
Wait,
time.
what's the hockey draft? The NHL draft?
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
Oh, good Lord. But you don't even like hockey.
I hate it. No, I don't like it. I did watch Game 7. Well, the end of Game 7.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I'm not so much a hockey guy. But that draft is tomorrow, so drafts are fun.
Drafts are fun. So I got to ask you before we dig into all the things, and maybe we should probably tell folks why we're doing a live stream here. How did you feel about the Timberwolves draft haul, man? They were aggressive. And you correctly predicted one of their picks later in the night, if I recall, from our previous conversations, but I'm curious
Yeah,
what you think about their
so
trade.
I did not see it coming. Like, I was watching the draft, and I was quickly, refreshing Twitter because everything happens there first. And so it said Dillingham's going 8 to the Spurs and is on his way to Minnesota. So I actually ran upstairs to tell my kids, and they're like, "Well, what'd they trade?" And then so there was the panic for a while because I'm like, they're not just getting him, right? You're not just moving from 27 to 8
Right?
without giving something up. As it turns out, they didn't give up any players, which I think is brilliant. Future picks, which they were going to be they're limited in being able to move them anyway. So when you asked me what I thought, I said for a number of reasons. So that when they're hard capped at the second apron, like, they can't trade these picks, and so they've really handcuffed themselves improving the current team now, as far as free agency goes. But one thing that I know that we talked about during the postseason too, was that they just don't have enough guys that can attack the hoop.
Yep.
And so Dillingham is maybe the best at that in this draft. My kids had asked me during the day, like, who do you think is going to be the best player in this draft? Because it's not a great draft. And I said, well, I think the guy that has the highest ceiling is Rob Dillingham. And so I there are certain players that he gets comped to, and I know you don't like comps.
Sure
And
don't.
I was waiting for the Allen Iverson comp because that's the size and the game type, and
That's aggressive, dude. That feels
it
aggressive.
is. Oh, it's the highest comp that you could give the guy, right? And so Tyrese Maxey is someone that you hear more about, but Maxey's kind of a bigger body guy. The thing with Iverson was he was tiny, and he's going to fit really well with the second unit immediately, because of just the skills that he has. But that was what they had to do. They had to get guys that can go downhill and get to the hoop. And so Terrence Shannon was really that guy at 27. And then they pulled the trigger on him at 27. And there was guys on the board that I really liked at 27. Isaiah Collier would have been, doubling up on a point guard, but they don't have that, and they can't add. Conley's old, and you can't add to your team with outside free agents unless they're veteran minimum because of this second apron thing. So if they have 2 point guards right now that are free agents, so it's like, well, you could just replace them. But I like what they did. And Dillingham is going to be fun, and I think he really will fit kind of the culture that the Wolves have. And if you watch them close, they had a lot of fun. They were a group that seemed kind of pretty tight knit, despite Anderson and Gobert getting in their little fight the end of the previous year. And so I think he'll fit in really well. And if right before the draft, they talked to Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham, and Shepherd said, Dillingham is a funny guy. He's laid back. But I think that he'll fit in well with that group. And the ceiling for next year's Wolves team is high. I mean, Western Conference Finals, right?
You're all in, dude.
The ceiling for next year is high. And so, I'm excited about that. I mean, my background as a fan in sports, basketball is the one that I know the most about. I mean, that's the one that I've coached at the high school level, and probably that was my best sport as a player. And so that's really one that I can get real geeky about. But I mean, I guess I coach I coach football too, and I coach
You
baseball.
coach everything, dude.
So I like sports. I like drafts. Anyway, love the Wolves picks. Was kind of hoping they'd pick someone today, but I'm guessing the bouncing down the board and then off out of round 2 is to collect some cash from other teams, because they're going to be paying a pretty significant luxury tax here at the end of the season.
For sure. Well, if you're happy with it, dude, that's good enough for me. I got on the bandwagon at the end of last season. I'm sure I will be much more present on it from the jump next go around. But we should maybe just spend a second here talking about why we're live streaming an episode. And this is really like a trial run for us, right? Because we're going to try and live stream through the entire first day of the MLB draft, which is coming up 2 weeks from Sunday, which feels aggressive, man. How are you feeling about that? I feel like that's a lot. It's going to be a lot of us talking, man.
Yeah. I guess the live stream stuff doesn't really bother me for one reason we do this, right? So we're going to talk, I'm kind of multitasking anyway when we do this. I think having multiple kids allows you to just be good at having one foot in one thing and one foot in another thing and not fall over. But that's another. I mean, I live stream live sports for my school district, so I have to be prepared to sit and talk for a long time about whatever I want to talk about. And that's the thing. Like nobody's going to tell us stop talking about that because it's our thing. Right.
Sure is.
And so we can stay live for 3 hours or 5 hours or 7 hours or how long we have to do it. And if people don't like it, they can just stop listening. Right.
For sure. But we hope folks will join us. The goal, right, is going to be to live stream through and give some Brewers and Cubs and Twins centric analysis of the draft as it's happening, reaction to picks as they come up, talking through what's surprising, talking through picks that we like. We're going to have some guests on. We've started to hammer out a little bit of a schedule, and it's a little bit of an experiment. Obviously, we've never done that through a night of the draft before, but the MLB draft is the reason we started the podcast back last August, and we're close to a year in now. So that's what we got planned for night 1. And I hope if you are a Brewers, Cubs, or Twins fan, or tangentially a draft fan, you will consider joining us for a chunk of that, because I think it's going to be really fun.
So the one thing that I'm most unsure about is, am I just going to let you announce the picks? Because last year you were telling me what was happening before my TV was telling me what happened. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Do I even need to watch it, or are you just going to announce it and I just won't have it on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I did spoil some picks for you last year, which I didn't necessarily know that I would be doing. I think that would be kind of fun drama, but I'm also like, I'm now like looking ahead to like the technical stuff we got to work through of like I'm sure our like streams of like MLB Network or ESPN or whatever we're watching on are not synced up. So one of us is going to get that information a split second before and spoil it for the other. And if that's you spoiling it for me, I'm going to be mad.
See, and I'm okay with it, because we're also going to be on a delay for people that are watching us.
This is true.
And so I don't know that it matters one way or another. My TV sits way over there. And so I can have it on volume off and just, see whatever's on the bottom. And my guess though is that I'll really be just letting you tell me who to cross off on your consensus board that I have printed off in front of me. And that's how we'll go. So, but yeah, that's going to be the one part where you can't all be synced up.
Not at all.
It's hard. So
I got to move actually though. I got to move my whole setup to where I'm in front of my whatever. That's boring. Let's talk about that another time. Dude, so we should so things that we're going to cover today in this kind of trial run. Conveniently for us, David Festa made his Major League Baseball debut today, so I want to definitely chop that up with you and get your thoughts. We're going to spend time breaking down another demographic in this draft class, in this case outfield, and I think I can speak for both of us when I say probably the most relevant demographic for maybe like the Cubs, Brewers, and Twins range in the first round, 14, 17, 21.
Yep.
So we'll talk about some guys there. And then I made a mistake, dude. I went hard on people for sending us questions, and we have a lot. So
perfect. Love it.
We're gonna save those to the end and knock them out. And there's a lot of really good ones. So let's talk David Fester first of all, because he was called up to make his MLB debut today against the Diamondbacks after Chris Paddock was put on the IL with what is it? Shoulder fatigue, I think is the diagnosis there.
Yeah, arm fatigue, tired arm, dead arm. Nothing that sounds like an injury.
Yeah,
sounds more like maintenance, which I think is
makes
not
sense.
Totally unexpected, right?
For sure. So, did you get a chance to see Festa's start? I'm really curious how it kind of matched up with your expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I had the game on. I was flipping between that and the NBA draft. And wouldn't you know, every time I turned back, the Twins were batting and scoring runs.
My goodness.
And even my kid said, he's like, Dad, we've had this game on for like 45 minutes and the Twins have only been pitching for like 3. He looked all right. I mean, he looked like he was throwing pretty hard. I saw a lot of 97s.
Mm-hmm.
The parts that I saw, I didn't see him in the zone much with his other pitches.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that they're there. And there's obviously going to be nerves. And the one thing too is he sat for a considerable amount of time.
So long, dude.
And for
30 minutes at a time.
Yeah, it's hard to get in the rhythm, right? But then you're just kind of in your own head for that time.
Yep.
And like, what do you say when you have this run support? You're like, hey, I'm just going to go out, and if I make a mistake, I make a mistake, but I'm not going to nibble, right? Mm-hmm. Because I have that leeway to make a mistake or two. So there was just a lot of stuff that lined up really well for him, but also made it a kind of a, how much do we make out of that? He got through 5, right? He
Mm-hmm.
gave up a handful of runs. He struck out. I saw he was at 2 at one point. I don't know if he struck out anybody else, because I think that was the 4th inning when he struck out his first batter.
It was 2.
Walked
1.
The first batter he put on, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, all in all, you're giving that guy another start.
Mm-hmm.
Did he touch anything higher than 97?
No, didn't touch anything higher than 97. But I think your point about sitting for a long time, like I made a joke about it, but I do actually think that's the thing. So I checked in the top of the 4th inning with 1 out. Diamondbacks pitchers had thrown 102 pitches, and David Festa had thrown 36. So he literally had 2 kind of 30-minute breaks right from the jump after his first inning to kind of cool off or whatever. And I think I agree with your assessment mostly. Like, my 2 cents is that like the control was good, right, in terms of strike throwing, right? So I think he threw about 67% strikes on the night. That's right around where he's been doing nicely at AAA in the last 4 or 5 starts. That's plenty. Major League average is a little south of that, I think. The command was not good, and that's where I think that the nerves kind of manifested. Like, if you go back and look at his first few innings that were scoreless, he left a lot of stuff right over the heart of the plate, and I think it's a testament to his stuff that it did not get hit. Like, it was a lot of ground balls, a lot of lazy fly balls, but I don't think he was locating his slider and his changeup or even his fastball up in the zone like he would want to. And then in that fourth inning where we gave up, I think 4 of the 5 runs he ended up giving up, that was just consecutive hits, and 3 of those were 85 miles per hour or less. And I think 2 of them were in the mid 70s. So it was like kind of like nothing contact, you know?
Right.
But I think he showed he can hang, and I hope he gets another start. I'm really curious what you think the Twins are going to do in terms of kind of how long are you going to let that play out? Because like you said, at the very least, right, he's shown like, oh, I can get big league hitters out. What do you think they're going to do with Paddock in terms of how much time off he gets? Because it doesn't, it's one of those things where it strikes me as like whenever they want to get him back and ease him back into the rotation, they can do it. But I'm curious what you think the kind of best case scenario there is for Festa.
So the All-Star break starts the 14th, right? When the draft is.
Yep.
So we're talking 14, probably 3 turns through the rotation. I would guess Festa gets 3 starts, right? And then the thing with Paddock, and I know that they've said that they want to get him a start. Did they say a start or 2 before the All-Star break? Why wouldn't you just shut him down for a month, right? Let Festa make his 3 starts or whatever gets his last start to the All-Star break. Then you option him down. You bring up a relief pitcher, and let him, get to the All-Star break. And if it's Henriquez or whoever, then option him down, and then you recall somebody when the break's over. But there was a handful of years ago when the Twins were bad. They like optioned 5 or 6 guys down right before the All-Star break. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And then they had like a 18-man roster over the All-Star break, and then they brought 6 guys up afterwards. So I would let Festa stick in the rotation. I mean, let's see how he does, obviously.
For sure.
But if he's serviceable, give Paddock a month off, ramp him up, and have him ready to go. The 5th turn out of the All-Star break or whatever that is.
Yep.
Because I think that the Twins need to know what their depth is, because if they're going to compete and Festa's not the real number 6 and Paddock is whatever he is, and it's the end of July, well, now we got to make a move.
Yep.
Right? So I think there's kind of a few purposes that have to be served with letting Festa do this and having Paddock, ramp back up because the real thing is August, September, October. Let's play.
Yep. Dude, I agree completely. I think that makes a ton of sense as a plan. And I mean, you also want Paddock. You also want Festa to go through that for his development, right? You want him to have to go through the routine, the 5-day cycle, the 5-day routine at the major league level, prep for different lineups, get more comfortable throwing his stuff, all the things that you've said. And so I agree. If he's serviceable, they should keep running him out there, especially if the Twins offense is going to remain as like incandescently hot as it has been the past little while. They've been absolutely crushing baseballs everywhere. So,
which they'll do for 7 or 8 games, and then they'll completely.
Hey, Seattle is up this week, so this will be about as solid of a pitching test, I think, as you're going to get in the American League. So it'll be a good litmus test for them for sure. But if folks are interested in more Festa content, I have something up at Twins Daily about just his pitch mix, where you can kind of expect from him, even how the Twins might play out a kind of innings limit for him this year if they chose to do that. I think I figured out that if you assume like 5 innings per start, that he might get somewhere between 8 and 11 starts over the course of the entire rest of the season. Now, how you want to chop that up with Paddock is a different thing. That's assuming kind of an innings cap for Festa based on how many innings he's pitched in previous minor league seasons and whatnot. But
Right.
Encouraging start, man. He can hang.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, let's talk. Shall we talk some draft, good sir?
I don't know why we wouldn't.
Okay, so how do you want to do this? Because here's the cool thing from my perspective. You're the one who's been knocking out all these articles and all this content at Brewer Fanatic, Northside Baseball, Twins Daily for the Brewers, Cubs, and Twins, and you are the person who wrote up this outfield demographic. So what do you want to do? Do you want to walk through one guy at a time? I really want to get your thoughts because I think we both agree that it's like fairly likely that the Twins and possibly the Brewers are going to dip into this demographic with one of their first couple of picks. So how do you want to pick this apart?
Well, I think if we just kind of start at the top, and
Okay.
we've done between the both of us, we've done all the different positions.
So
right?
many.
But I think as we got to this part, yeah, there's the chance that Christian Moore goes off the board to one of these three teams or before, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the chance that Cameron Smith goes off the board to one of these teams or before. For most of the other, like the top pitchers are going to be gone, right?
For sure.
Savage might be around for the Cubs. I could see that. I would say that that's a coin flip. The other pitchers are the top pitchers are going to be gone. Caminiti probably going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
The college hitters, right, that are dominating all the top 10 mock drafts are going to be gone. And then it's really the Seaver King and on that it's like, okay, that's where this draft starts, not just for the Cubs, not just for the Brewers, not just for Twins, but for everybody else. And the heaviest part of that draft is probably going to be outfielders.
Yep.
Right. And so I think that just kind of lends itself to, as we talk about these three teams and what they could do, we have a list of them that makes sense really for all these teams. And so I think, yeah, we can go through all these guys. I think I wrote up 5 or 6, or I had 5 or 6 included in my write-up. You added a couple more, but I think all of them are potential targets.
For sure.
Maybe not the most likely targets, but I think they're all potential targets for the three teams that we talk about. So we could just start at the top of this outfield list, what we like, what we don't necessarily like. And I'm going to pull up my articles because they're different.
Cool. Let's do it. So maybe I can talk through this first guy a little bit and then we can get your take. So we'll go through these in order that they currently appear on the consensus board. So if you're unfamiliar with that, that's like 10 or 11 industry draft boards pulled together for like an aggregate ranking. So Carson Benj is the first guy I think you wrote up and talked about. He was actually a two-way player at Oklahoma State. Fastballs up to 97 on the mound. He is going to be drafted as an outfielder, really solid approach, like low chase rate, contact percentages over 80%. That's really solid. I think the majority of evaluators feel like the swing maybe needs some work at the pro level. I'm not a swing expert, but production was really, really solid. He had 335, 444, 665. That's good for a 1.109 OPS, 18 home runs, 24 doubles, 49 walks, and 51 strikeouts in 61 games. So basically as many walks as strikeouts, which I know is something you like to look at closely. I feel like people are not really excited about Benj. I've seen him connected most with the Brewers. I'm really curious what your take is on him. Is it like he's not that... He just like doesn't jump out from other prospects, but he seems to go like a little untalked about given that he's 15th overall on the board.
Yeah. And I think if you historically look through drafts, there's going to be guys that you find like that in every draft. Brock Wilken, for example, was that type of player for me last year, right? I knew he was going to go in the first round. I didn't necessarily think he was going to be an outstanding prospect. There wasn't really anything to not like about him.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, yeah, that'd be a solid pick for somebody. Get him in the pipeline and see how he does. And Benj is really that guy for me too, right? He'll be a solid pick. He'll figure into the top 6 of most prospect groups, right? I mean, I would call him if the Twins drafted him right now and you plugged him into the system, he's 7 maybe, right? Um, and I think maybe for the Cubs, he's in that same range. For the Brewers, maybe a tad higher, because of just where those top guys are. And I would probably need to look at who's graduated from these prospect groups as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's not like this huge ceiling, right? But I don't think there's a super low floor. So I think you're kind of getting what you're getting, and a lot of college hitters sometimes feel like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I could see him going in that mid first round range. I don't see him going a lot higher, right? I don't think
Agreed.
there's anything that screams, "Hey, this guy's going to come off the board because of fill in the blank." Right. And so when you don't have that, those are also the guys sometimes that tumble a little bit.
I feel you.
Where he goes off the board at 23 or 24 or whatever. And he is a very solid guy because he'll make quick work of
the lower levels.
Yeah. And then it's going to be a year from now when he's first getting into AA,
mm-hmm.
where that's where we see what he is. And so that to me is the prospect that we have with a fallback option of he can throw gas. So he's a right fielder. And if the hitting just doesn't work out 3 years from now, you say, okay, well, stand on the hill and see how hard you throw it.
So the only thing I want to say about Benj that I feel like a broken record for is just like a cursory reminder, which is this. In the second round last year, the Twins took Luke Keeschel, right? And there was not one person who was excited about that pick.
You were.
I was. But okay, fine. There were not many people who were like, "Oh, Keeschel, like really interesting year." Blah, blah. I felt like Benj is that kind of guy too, yeah. Right? And that he's just like he's put up really strong production. And you fast forward a year, I don't think you could have possibly imagined things going better from the Twins' perspective for Luke Keeschel, a guy who is now a like appearing on top 100 lists, appearing as high as like the 60s. Mashing in AA, by the way, an OPS close to 900 in AA. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. And I'm not saying that Benj would do that, but it's just to say, just because he's a bit under the radar doesn't mean that the production won't be there when he transitions to a pro. So, yeah, totally. So Jeremy, you said though, and I agree with you, right? That like nothing really like super jumps off the page tools wise. Let's talk about someone for whom that's not true at all. Because I feel like this guy is maybe like one of the hardest guys, and we've done a couple of mock drafts now up at the sites. I have a hard time placing him and like finding like who was going to take this guy. So that's Vance Honeycutt, center fielder out of North Carolina. He's currently 19th on the board. We'll start with the really good stuff, obviously. Plus center fielder, plus speed. It's a plus glove. He's going to be a close to elite defensive center fielder as a pro. The power is legit. The hit tool is a question mark. There's definitely some contact questions. He strikes out a lot. I think his strikeout rate at the end of the season was like north of 27%. I think that would be close to a record for a first round draft pick. And I think I'm right in saying there's only like 8 or 9 guys ever who have been drafted in the first round with a strikeout rate north of 25% in their junior year of college. One of those being Trevor Larnach. So what are your thoughts on Honeycutt? Does the hit tool stuff worry you? Can you find a home for him that makes sense? And do you think the Twins or Brewers might be interested in him at 17 or 21.
He does not strike me as a Twins or Brewers type draft pick. But I do think that there's enough loud tools that somebody will be like, yep, let's just get him in the system.
Yeah.
Because at worst, right, his floor is like you said, an elite defender, right? Great speed, possesses some tools, right, that you would feel really good about. Like the Orioles make sense to me. And I could see teams like the Mets, like the bright lights, where you are just attracted to what he has. He was when he would come up in the College World Series, like you had to stop to watch what he did.
Yeah.
And a lot of times he was put in the outfield bleachers, right?
Yep.
And so there's so much to like. The concern is that he's not like striking out a ton because he's chasing.
Mm-hmm.
He's striking out because he's just missing hittable pitches. That's kind of the red flag for teams. And there's going to be teams that can't get off that, right? And so when we talk about bench being like, there's a pretty narrow, like where he's going to get picked. With Honeycutt, there's going to be teams where it's like, yep, that team makes sense. This would be the right time for him, where they're just like, nope, not going to touch it.
Agreed.
Or there's going to be another team that's going to be like, oh, if we get the opportunity to take him, we're going to take him because we think we can fix this. Because it only takes one, right? There could be 28 teams that have him off their board and 2 teams that have him on, and one team that loves him, and boom, he goes higher than we think. And so that's kind of the harder part. Like bench, he's going to be on 30 boards, but doesn't have any tools that set him apart from guys that may also be available on the board. And Honeycutt has those types of tools. So he's really interesting because he's an everyday center fielder. If he hits 235, right, you'll stick him out there. You'll put him at the bottom of your lineup. He'll put the ball on the ground and run fast,
right?
And he has power too. Like that's the other thing. Like
he does have power.
He can freaking hit. So
he's like Michael A. Taylor type, right? Where he's gonna, but like last season's Michael A. Taylor, where he has 20 home runs and plays Gold Glove caliber defense and doesn't hit for much average.
Yeah, and that was, it wasn't going to give him a big contract, but if he does that at 23 years old or 24 or 25 years old, yeah, teams are going to keep him around forever because you need guys that can go catch fly balls, and he will absolutely go catch fly balls. So for me, he's a definite first round pick. His range is just, starts at 10 and goes until the very end of the first round, maybe into the comp. So
for sure.
But yeah, he is fun to watch. He'll just
really
be super frustrating if he's on your favorite team.
Okay, let's move on. Talk about the next guy. We're going to dip into the prep outfield demographic, which is not really super deep, but there is one prospect here who we should touch on. That is Slade Caldwell. He is a left-handed hitting center fielder out of Arkansas Valley View High School, currently number 20 on the consensus board. I don't think it's a secret. I love Caldwell's profile a ton. And part of that is that MLB likes to undervalue the short kings. And he's a short king. 5'9" he's listed at. I've seen anything from 5'6" to 5'10 and a half. So somewhere in that range. Really, really good hitter, like hitterish. He's never going to have a lot of power, but he can yank a home run to the pull side, right? Double plus speed, just going to be a nightmare on the base paths, plus center field defense type of deal. Not like a massive arm, which is maybe a little bit of a detractor. The comp that's popular with Caldwell is Corbin Carroll with less power, which I think is fairly exciting if you rewind to last season and don't talk much about this season. seen in the last few days, Jeremy, his name's starting to float down more into like the sandwich round, into comp A on mocks and projections. Without teeing you up too much, like he does like feel somewhat of a twinsy pick. Does he not? Like he's also kind of renowned as like a high character, hard worker type, which I think is something they seem to value a ton. What are your thoughts on Caldwell?
Yeah, I mean, and having heard some of the things that I've heard from certain people inside the organization, like he really does fit.
Mm-hmm.
The part that's always harder with prep guys though is he can go to school and prove doubters wrong and be a top 3 pick in a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and the other thing too is at 17, 18 years old, are they done growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the likelihood is that, yeah, he probably is. And you'd have to know a little bit about the family and how those, is the dad tall, is the mom tall, right? Get into the whole genetics thing. But if he's floating down boards, I don't think it's because teams don't like him. I think it's because he's at the point where he's like, well, I'll bet on myself, right? Guys that go first round, guys that go first day are going to sign.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I really do think, like, if the top 2 names on your board, 1A and 1B, are Honeycutt and Caldwell, that's difficult, right? And I would probably, if the price tag's the same, I would go Caldwell.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that his ceiling is, the top of his range is high, right? Um, Again, like I said with Honeycutt, maybe that does fall in the first round into the comp round. Caldwell could be the same. The one unknown, the most unknown, is what's his desire to go play college baseball, right? So he's committed to. I thought I just had this somewhere. Shoot, I didn't write it down, but
I hope you got it because I don't. I want to say Arkansas. If he's from Arkansas, would
he is
be.
from Arkansas. And I thought I had it, but I don't. But 2-time state player of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Steals a bunch of bases. Um, I think he goes in that same, and I think he's more the Twins type than
He's committed to Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. He's more the Twins type than Honeycutt is,
I would
right?
agree.
But for every team that we can say it, like for the Twins, we can say that. For other teams, we would say the opposite. And so
Yep.
I think he goes in that range. And I do think that he turns out to be a good baseball player. Like I'm more confident in his long-term trajectory than I am Honeycutt's.
So I just want to throw one other thing out there on Caldwell that's relevant to preps in general, I think. So it's a useful time to bring it up. And this is the kind of thing that we're going to talk about more extensively on draft night, right? So we're going to start like an hour before we get started. We'll have time to cover stuff like this. Bonus pools are going to come into play a lot here. 2 things, right? How many picks do you have and how much money do you have? And those aren't necessarily the same thing. But you've got a team like the Arizona Diamondbacks who have a pick at 29, a pick at 31, and a pick at 35, right? They have their regular pick, a comp A pick, and then a pick for Corbin Carroll winning Rookie of the Year. They control that part of the draft that ratchets up their bonus pool really, really significantly. And so they have a certain amount of financial leverage over some teams, not all teams. The Twins are in a really good position this year in terms of bonus pool. I think they have the 12th most money despite picking 21st, but there's a number of teams, Cleveland obviously being the most prominent, where Cleveland's bonus pool is like 18 million. They can, I mean,
Do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want. And so that is the only other factor there. Milwaukee have a bunch of money in picks. The Diamondbacks, Cleveland, the Twins, the Orioles are well placed. And so there are other teams that will definitely kind of impact how that goes. Okay, let's talk about a couple more guys, Jeremy. Ryan Waldschmidt is a massive riser on this board. He's up to 29th now. He's going to move even higher because MLB Pipeline just updated their rankings and he moved up a ton. He was a transfer from Charleston Southern to Kentucky after his sophomore season. Just like he's like a what you would call a data darling profile.
Mm-hmm.
Just does everything well. He had 359, 482, 657, 14 home runs, 24 stolen bases, as many walks as strikeouts. I've heard him linked pretty prominently with the Cubs, as high as 14. I think his range is somewhere in like 13 to 25. Didn't have a great postseason, but had a really good season overall. Any thoughts on Waldschmidt?
Yeah, so he had a knee injury last year. Doesn't, again, not the type that has, like Benj, that has a loud carrying tool, right? And so I think that sometimes limits the ceiling or how high they'll go. 14 home runs in a college season where everybody was hitting a lot of home runs.
Yeah.
Like that to me doesn't translate to being a 20 home run guy in the majors. 25 stolen bases. So he's got decent speed, but I mean, you see a lot of stolen base numbers that are pretty high. 41 walks, 45 strikeouts. I think he's going to be solid. Like the numbers that teams have access to would suggest that he's a better player than maybe what people saw. And so then you got to look at the front offices that value that more so than the old guys that are like, you didn't pass the eye test, right? And so again, I feel like that's going to push him down the board a little bit. Because when faced with Slade Caldwell or Waldschmidt, what way is this going to go? I mean, he looks the type more, but I see him as a back half guy. I don't think he'll go to the Cubs. I think he'll be a little bit later, personally, but I could see a team like the Rays, right?
Yep. That's a good shout.
That make that call. So. Yeah, there's certainly a lot to like, and a lot of ceiling left. And you wonder too, like when you have a significant injury, like how long until your body and mind are both 100%, right?
Right.
And so that's a big question with him. But yeah, another first rounder who's worked his way up into the first round before we now talk about the opposite.
Yeah. The opposite is Mike Sirota. He is a center fielder for Northeastern, currently 47th on the board. Was a consensus top 10 to top 12 player preseason. Right-handed hitter, right-handed thrower. He just did not have a good year. But there's still, I think, a lot to like, right? Things that teams will like. In 2023, he had a big kind of power breakout. He went from 4 home runs to 17. He's had 2 really good years on the Cape, 942 OPS with a wood bat. Teams are going to like that. First 2 seasons at Northeastern, his K percentage was 18%. Walk percentage was 14.2. That's great because it gives you this like platform, right, of like on-base skills. He makes good swing decisions. He's a great defender. He has plus speed. It's a good arm. All of that is great. He has not seen a lot of like elite velocity, hasn't seen a lot in the mid to upper 90s, and he had a really poor season. So my question for you is, how do you weigh 2023 versus 2024, and has he fallen too far?
Yeah, I think that's the question that 32 have to answer, right? Because when I first started digging, I'm like, okay, just a bad year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's shown enough that probably still a day 1 pick. And then the deeper that I started digging, I was like, wait a second, he was an average player as a freshman and an average school and an average conference, maybe below.
Mm-hmm.
Then he bookends a really good season with 2K performances. Okay, so he has he has a stretch of a year where he's really, really good.
Yep.
And now he's an not average. He's an above average player on a not very good team. 298 was the worst he's batted as a college player. His home run numbers dropped back. He went from 4 to 18 to 7, right? 7 home runs.
Those all became doubles this year. All those home runs.
Okay. So what, like, to me, maybe that 1 year was the outlier, and he's a above average player at an average school and belongs on day 2. Like, and those types of things tend to show relatively quickly at the professional level. The other thing is, guys that were good, real good in 2023 with the transfer portal, you don't stay at average schools, right? Seaver King,
maybe,
right? So to me, I'm more down on him than I thought I would be, than I was 2 weeks ago, because I'm like, dude, like, you had a good 12 months, and beyond that, we can find guys like you, and we can find guys that do what you did only at the SEC, in the SEC or the ACC.
Yeah.
And you're doing it at Northeastern.
So that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I want to bring up 2 more guys as kind of honorable mentions in this category. And the only reason I felt it was necessary to list them, because I do think they're relevant players for the teams that we talk about as later picks. So Jared Thomas, outfielder for UT, a weird combo, dude. Like, first baseman / center fielder. He had a really productive year, 349, 435, 635 with 16 home runs. He had 35 extra base hits, 31 walks versus a lot of strikeouts.
Yeah, I love that.
60 strikeouts. And then Dylan Dreiling is another guy I wanted to bring up to you. Played tremendously in the College World Series. I'm sure he's more prevalent for folks than maybe previously just because of that exposure. But through Super Regionals, he was hitting 320, 445, 689 with 20 home runs, 49 walks, and 56 strikeouts in 65 games. Just like a really well-rounded profile. So we've got Sirota at 47 on the consensus board. Jared Thomas, whose numbers we just talked through, at 53, Big 12, and Dylan Dreiling, SEC, at 58. Right. Who are you to order those guys for me?
Well, that's where this becomes difficult, right? Because if Sirota's at Northeastern, knowing that he doesn't have, like, Dreiling was on the best offense in all of college baseball, right? So you're not pitching around Dylan Dreiling like you are potentially pitching around Mike Sirota. And so that's where I would need way more information, right? I need to see what happens when the ball hits the bat. These are things that you usually give me, right? Contact rate. These are things that you have. Exit velocity stuff. I would be most likely to take Dreiling out of that group.
For sure.
Walk strikeouts are about the same. Hits more home runs. Hit better at a harder level, right? There was better production. You lose some of that speed, right? He's probably more of a corner type. Then Sirota for me as a center fielder, and then Thomas, because twice as many strikeouts as walks. Like, there's going to be more. The floor is going to be lower, right? If you're not hitting the ball and you're not. Is he a first baseman? Right?
No, he's not a first baseman. He's a really good athlete. I actually think he has a shot to stick in center field.
Okay, so
but Sirota is definitely playing center field.
Correct, and Dreiling is probably not
a corner. He's a corner guy. Right? Yeah.
So to me, like, if all things are equal, I'd go Dreiling, Sirota, Thomas, and be willing to be wrong on that. But I think Sirota, like, the range of outcomes on Sirota is super high, and I don't know that either of the other two are nearly as wide as Sorota's is.
Yep. I like Dreiling as a sneaky Twins pick for maybe the second round, along with there's like 3 or 4 college hitters. Him, Gage Miller, Peyton Stovall. I feel like the Twins are going to take one of those guys. There's someone I'm forgetting with maybe the third pick here.
Well, as long as we're talking about Jared Thomas,
yeah,
and Jared Thomas plays for Texas.
Oh my god!
Can we just touch on that?
Schlossnagel?
Yeah,
dude, the most obnoxious answer. Did you see his answers to that question?
Yeah, selfish
question. I was brutal. So first of all,
shout out set the table here.
So Texas A&M loses in the decisive Game 3 of a really, really entertaining College World Series to Tennessee. Without their best player, Braden Montgomery, who broke his ankle earlier in the postseason. Jim Schlossnagel, who is the head coach of Texas A&M and has really created like a monster team, is doing his post-game interview, and there has been speculation earlier in the day that UT is sending a contingent to the College World Series, and their AD will not come home without Jim Schlossnagel. So an A&M-based reporter, apologies, I forget his name, but shout out to that guy. He asked Schlossnagel to comment on speculation that he might potentially leave A&M for UT after the game, and Schlossnagel went off on him.
He didn't specifically say anything about Texas. He said a certain job.
Sure.
Right? Which is
it was a very well-phrased question.
And it's a fair question to ask.
100%.
You ask players after the big game loss to play again next year.
Right.
You ask coaches after big game wins or losses, are you coming back next year? Right. And so it wasn't out of line, in my opinion. Right. There are bad questions. There are bad times to ask good questions. Yep. He asked an appropriate question, worded it very well.
Yep.
At the perfect time.
Yep. 100%. All of that. Agree. So Schloss went off on him and said, that's a selfish question. That would be like if you asked Braden Montgomery, is he going to sign? Well, Braden Montgomery would tell you, yes, he's going to sign.
Yeah.
Anyway, he kind of went off and then said all this. And he said, literally, I took the job at Texas A&M to never take another job again. Yeah. Less than 24 hours later, he is named officially as UT's new head baseball coach.
Yeah. And so he took that job at Texas A&M after being at Texas Christian. Right. And so
same thing happened there.
So the whole thing, like the whole ML thing, and then we're getting off topic here, right? I don't hate any of it because you have people that come into your living room as a high school kid and they tell you, I'm going to be your coach. I'm going to be your coach. And then they bail.
Right.
So I never blame the kids if they have the opportunity to leave. He took this job, and there's a lot of members of that Texas A&M team now that are in the portal.
13
that are expected to go to Texas.
So, and I think from what I've heard, a few rumblings, there will be a couple of guys going to Texas, but there is also going to be some guys going elsewhere. So there's a few guys that are most notable, and we'll quickly touch on this and then move on to some questions. So Jace Laviolette, he is going to be a top 10 pick in the 2025 draft. Just exceptional hitting outfielder. He was committed to LSU before he flipped to Texas A&M. Gavin Grohovac and Caden Sorrell, they're both freshmen. They're two of the best freshmen in the country. They've been absolute monsters. Caden Kent, that's Jeff Kent's kid. Did you see when he got picked off what Jeff Kent did?
Yeah.
Brutal. Anyway, I think at last count, they were up to 13 guys in the portal. And I mean, that's just a program record. And then my last thing I'll say on it, dude, is my other wondering, what about the incoming crop for Texas A&M? You have guys that are high on the board, and I'm forgetting some guys up top, but Sawyer Farr, he is a prep shortstop in the top 100. He's committed to A&M. There's another couple of guys. Does this impact their incoming crop of freshmen for the fall too? It's really a wild chain of events, and I don't know. It was a bizarre 24 hours in college baseball.
Yeah, crazy.
Okay, let's move on to some questions, dude. First of all, thank you to everybody who answered the call for questions. Jeremy, we got nice emails and messages from people this week. It's always very surprising to me. This is a question from Josh, who sent me a message on Twitter. Josh sent us a really nice message. Thank you so much. And I thought he has a really great question, so I want to get your take on it first. And I'm going to paraphrase a lot of these because some of them were really long, so I'm just going to kind of give the gist. He said, a lot of prep arms seem to have a similar profile or similar write-up. They're listed as athletic. They have similar mid-90s velocity on their fastball. They have 2 good pitches. What separates prep pitchers for you, and what do you like to see as a pitch or non-pitching trait that helps you separate prep pitchers one from the other?
I think it's a lot's going to be in the delivery, right? If you see something mechanically that either suggests, oh, we make this small tweak and we unlock velo, or it's something on the other end where you're like, ooh, mechanically this just isn't going to work, right? And I think there's going to be certain traits that will get you noticed right away, right? If you're touching 95,
yep,
right,
it's a magic number.
And then all of the Rapsodo stuff where it's spin rate, right? And so you're looking for certain numbers, right, with your curveball, with your changeup. And then I think the other thing too that organizations look at is the type of instruction that you've got. And so if you're playing it on, these select teams with the best coaches, and I think a lot of organizations have decent relationships with those organizations, that you kind of know how these guys have been coached. On the flip side of that, the professional teams have a pretty good idea when guys haven't been coached very well, right? So I know an example, a prep guy that was taken in the Twins organization a handful of years ago that was didn't really impress a lot with the velocity, but and didn't have any makings of a breaking ball, right? But frame wise, looked great. Team loved his delivery, loved his approach, loved his character, but really just basically said he hasn't been taught how to throw a curveball, and so we're not concerned that he doesn't know how to throw a curveball because we'll teach him, right? He's just never taught how to throw a curveball, and that's why. And so there's stuff like that where you really get under the hood, right? The car looks shiny and nice, and the cars all look about the same. Some just happen to be 6'3" and some happen to be 5'11". But then you look at the frame and say, can we put 25 pounds on here of good weight, right? Because that's going to do it. You look at the lower half, like I was at a 13U baseball game, and there was a kid that with thighs that were as big as my waist, right? And it's like, this looks different than the 13-year-old on the other team. And so I think there's stuff like that where you really kind of have to look under the hood. You gotta just try to get an idea, because for a lot of these kids, they're not done growing. And then you ask questions. I mean, it's like area scouts are recruiters. You go see what they've done in the weight room. You're like, oh shoot, they don't lift weights. Well, we can get you in a program, and all of a sudden things change, versus the guy that doesn't look like he lifts weights but does, and has different traits. So I mean, that's a long answer, but I think there's so many little things that are going to separate thing. And really, if we talked about Josh Noth and Charlie Soto last year, right? Soto threw a little bit harder at the time, but they were both low to mid 90s, right? Noth has a curveball with exceptional spin. Like their profiles aren't going to read
They're different, yeah.
different, but if you looked at those two, they're not even close to the same human, and so you're going to just project them differently. So, but what's also going to separate one pitcher from the next pitcher is what they tell you they're going to sign for, because that's a significant thing. And sometimes guys tell one team one thing and then tell another team another thing because they want to dictate where they go, and they can. So there's so much stuff. But yeah, you're looking for minimums, right? 95 can spin it or have a great changeup, right? Have some secondary thing that you think can profile as a professional pitch, and a delivery that they can repeat.
Solid. I don't have anything to add to. Those are great summary. And I think like the piece that you brought up about like an opportunity, Ryan Jeffers is actually a great example of that. Not a pitcher, but I think Tom Froming like reposted this recently when he was on the absolute heater at the beginning of the year, and it was like Jim Callis, who's awesome, doing like the kind of the quick reaction to him being drafted in the second round because everyone thought that was a reach. But he had put up insane hitting numbers. But Jeffers didn't have a catching coach in college. He was like a self-taught catcher off of YouTube, right? And so one of the Twins' bets in making that pick was, we're going to get him with Tanner Swanson, and we can teach him to catch. And he's become at least like an average major league catcher, obviously through a ton of work. But that's the kind of thing that you're referring to, right? Is like what's the kind of opportunity with the pitcher that maybe hasn't been tapped into yet? We want to kind of mine that and find out what that is before we take a guy. Okay, next question is from Twitter. The handle was @CharlieSotoAce. Solid, I like it. Okay, so he says Matt Wallner, Brooks Lee, and Severino, all incredibly hot at AAA at the moment. All just absolutely mashing. What are the odds we see them on the major league rosters during the season, and how soon should we expect them? So you got to handicap this. First of all, I want you to give a percentage for each one that they're going to be back on the or come onto for the first time the major league roster at all this season. Matt Wallner, Brooks Lee, Junior Severino, go. What's their percentage chance?
Wallner, 100%.
Okay.
Brooks Lee, 97%.
Okay.
And Severino, 0%.
0. Wow.
No chance.
Okay. So now I want you to handicap them by like month. So give me like a very approximate, like beginning of July, middle of July, end of July, beginning of August, whatever for each one. And then you can tell me about why Severino's never getting a shot.
I think Wallner will be up sometime in late July or August.
Hit another home run today, by the way.
Well, yeah, and really it's like when the need for an outfielder appears,
For sure.
right? Or when Larnach goes back to being Trevor Larnach, because really that's the spot, right? That's the spot that he's going to get.
Wallner's up to 19 home runs now in AAA.
Yeah, I mean he's good, but it's like you have to make do. You have to take advantage of the opportunity that you're given, and he did last year, and so he spent the whole year up, right? He got sent down, he came back up, he raked, and now it's like he didn't take advantage of the opportunity, so he go to the back of the line, and that's where he has to wait until there's an opportunity. Brooks Lee, it looked like at
today. It looked like today,
5 o'clock, that he was going to be, and honestly, Correa's going to wake up sore
Yeah, for sure.
And if he's deemed, what's today, Thursday, so they're going to start.
He said he's going to be in the lineup tomorrow, Jeremy.
And if he's not, if he's not in the lineup on Friday or Saturday or Sunday, then you just say, well, why don't we give you another week and we'll bring Brooks Lee up for a week. And so I could see him being up relatively soon, whether that's the beginning of July because Correa's hurt, or I think he'll debut before August 1st because he's crushing it right now.
He is
absolutely crushing it. And Severino, I mean, what's he going to play? Third or first? Right?
First DH.
He's not playing. He's not playing those positions because they have, like I mentioned, guys that have been given the opportunity that are getting it done. Royce Lewis is going to play third base, right? Jose Miranda has been great,
really good,
and so you're not going to push him out of the way. And if he doesn't perform, then you want that left-handed bat up, and then Kirilloff gets another shot.
Yep.
And so Severino is he's just not going to, and it's no fault of his own, right? The only way he gets that opportunity is if guys get hurt and he's the next one standing. And right now he's not. And so that's why I just don't give him that chance. Yeah. Wallner's the next outfielder, Lee's the next infielder, and Kirilloff is in that mix as well. And Severino, he's not in it for me.
I agree. Okay, next. This is a good question. I hope you haven't seen this one. From Sweet Lou Hennessy, who is one of our writing buddies at Twins Daily. He says, which member of the Twins Daily writing staff would you draft first overall and why? There's a lot of scope for you to troll people with this answer, Jeremy. So any thoughts? Who would you take number one overall?
What are we doing?
I think you're no, I don't. I think you're just drafting your preferred writer. That's how I interpreted the question.
Oh, well, then I'm drafting Seth because Seth is the OG, right? Yeah, because that's what turned me on to writing and reading about the Twins was SethSpeaks.net. I actually texted Seth this morning.
That's wild.
And said, let's bring back SethSpeaks.net as a Wolves blog.
There you go.
But somebody else has it, like it's some foreign blog. If I was drafting to drink beer, I'd probably draft Parker. I feel like Parker probably drinks the most beer. And if I wanted to, lay an album down, I'd draft Nick. So I feel like everybody's got their. If I was drafting to win a mascot race, I would draft me because I won the mascot race.
One of my favorite videos we've ever clipped. That was very fun. If you have not seen that, find Jeremy absolutely crushing Bonus and company in the mascot race at Target Field. It's very insane.
Who are you drafting, and for what reason?
Lou was going to be one of my picks, but then he spread some misinformation about me on the Twins Off Daily podcast, so he's fallen to the bottom.
What did he say? I didn't hear this.
He said in jest that I guaranteed that Zebby Matthews would have a Garrett Cole-like career.
Oh, that's funny though.
Which is funny.
That's hilarious.
I respect it.
So for guys that make fun of you, he goes number one.
Yeah,
I would go number two then, I feel like, in that draft.
I think I would. It might be True Blood out of sympathy because he has to edit my writing.
Okay, fair.
And that's a task I wouldn't wish on anybody. So he'd definitely be up there. Not to mention, you got to be somewhat of a boss to write at, manage, etc. 3 baseball sites plus contribute a BP and all that jazz. So maybe I'll take True Blood. This is kind of my sympathy vote for having to put up with all of us.
Do you want to draft anybody else for any other reason?
I'm definitely not drafting Greg. Just leave it at that. I think that'll do. All right, here's a great question. We're back to the like serious draft questions. So Matt Lenz, I love this one. Actually, Matt, I want you to know I researched this for you, man. He asks, knowing what you know about how teams value draft picks, what type of player do you think you could get for the number 1 overall pick in a draft, assuming the draft picks were tradable? Do you want to embarrass yourself, Jeremy, and take a guess at this before I attempt to give you a somewhat researched answer that is probably significantly out of date?
Yeah. So Guardians are drafting first, right?
Yeah. Yep.
They could get whoever they want off of the trade market with the 1-1 as the headliner. They would have to give up a little bit more, but I mean, you're giving up, that's a top 10 prospect and the money that's attached to it, right? So it's even more valuable than a top 10 prospect, because if the Guardians could trade this pick right now to, say, who's the best player that's going to be available at the deadline?
I don't think that's a very exciting list. It's like Vlad Guerrero, maybe, or like Pete Alonso, or
How much control does that Garrett Crochet have?
a lot, like
Okay.
three more maybe. Crochet,
So
yeah, sure.
so they could get him and and they could probably get more, because you don't just get a top 10 prospect, but you get the extra bonus money to do what else it's more valuable than their number 1 prospect.
Yeah, for sure. That's I was not expecting you to like take a strong position on that. I'm kind of thrown that you answered so confidently, because when I read that question, I was like, I don't know. So I went in search of answers, and I found a great post of Fangraphs by Craig Edwards back in the day, 2019. So a little outdated, but I think still relevant.
Pre-COVID, you can just throw it out the window. The world has changed. Everything.
No, stop. So long story short, he kind of came up with a formula to essentially convert a draft pick to a dollar amount based on projected FWAR that draft pick would accumulate times years of control.
Okay.
And his estimation was that, and this is in 2019, right? So that's 5 years ago. The number 1 pick in 2019 would be worth $45.5 million just of like cash value.
Okay.
Now, if you fast forward 5 years and you assume, what do the slots go up every year? 10%, basically.
10%, yeah.
So you can add on to that. I mean, I think in a dollar amount, what, like 75 million at this point, probably $75 million. I don't know how you're going to convert that into player value like Jeremy did so confidently, but it is a tremendous amount more than the slot value of that number 1 pick. Or, this is like 5 or 6 times worth Cleveland's, or this is 5 or 6 times more than Cleveland's entire bonus pool. So my guess was around 75 million in cash value for the number 1 overall pick, but obviously it kind of depends. I think last year's is going to be more expensive than this year's, but it was a fun thought exercise.
Yeah, but that's just the player.
Right.
And I'm saying, if you're the Guardians, if you get that pick,
right,
they're not getting, whether it's Bazana or Condon or Weatherholt or whoever.
Sounds like it's not going to be Condon.
You get that extra money.
Right. I get it. You get to buy you get to draft whoever else you want pretty much through the entire draft also.
Right. And so that's why it's like, it's the most valuable asset that would be available. And the problem is that the reason you can't trade it is because a team like the Yankees or the Dodgers, probably, or maybe the Padres, the teams that have the boatload of money, would just come in and say, here's what it's worth. And they would give a ton of, they would do it in prospects, right? They would give up a ton of prospects and just replenish those prospects, because they were able to get the top guy on their board and then float guys to their next spot and their next spot and their next spot. And that's simply why they don't allow you to trade those top picks, and it makes sense. I love how the NFL handles traded picks. I don't love how the NBA handles traded
Doesn't make
picks.
any sense to me.
And so it's a bummer because it would make it way more fun, right? It would make watching the draft, like if all of a
Agreed.
sudden it's like, hey,
Oh, it'd be chaos, dude.
oh my gosh, the Twins are on the board, or the Twins are on the clock at number 6. And it's like, what did they give up? It's over the All-Star break. You could trade players, right?
Yep.
But you would see that happen. You would see teams, because we're sellers, all of a sudden we're moving up to take another guy, and it's the money. It's the money just as much as it is the player.
All right, one more question, and this is another interesting one. We got great questions this week. Thank you, guys. This is from Isaac on Twitter. If your name's not Isaac, your Twitter handle is Isaac. He says there's so much hesitancy discussing Cags and Kurtz by draft media, Jack Caglione and Nick Kurtz from Florida and Wake Forest, respectively. But they remain firmly in the top 10 of most industry boards. Is there a disconnect in how they are discussed or how they're being viewed by teams? Jeremy, why is there so much hesitancy discussing Jack Caglione and Nick Kurtz and their kind of future projection as draft prospects?
Well, because they're first basemen, right? They're the lowest rung of the defensive spectrum, and all of their value has to come through their bat. Mm-hmm. And the history of that, going back to Matt Laporta and Prince Fielder and all the recent ones, it just hasn't been good. And they've been the very, very good college players, the best college players, the award-winning college players recently even. And so teams don't like to do it. Teams like to avoid it. But then when faced with it, they're like, if the bat plays, they're an all-star, right?
Yep.
Adrian Gonzalez went first overall as a high schooler, I'm pretty sure, as just a first baseman, right?
Yep.
Pete Alonso went really high.
I mean, the recent sorry to get across to you. The recent example, Spencer Torkelson, right, who was described as like the best college hitting prospect in 20 years, and he is doing what now? He's at AAA.
They drafted him as a third baseman. They refused to call him a first baseman.
I mean, but it was a first baseman, right?
But that's how you try to that's what teams are doing. Like, hey, if we draft Cags as a right fielder,
right,
it doesn't look like we're drafting him as a first baseman, and we might give him a shot at right field, right? And I think you could potentially play him in right field. It's not like he's 290 pounds. He looks athletic. You could maybe try Nick Kurtz at third base, but I think that's how this has to play out, right? You have to you don't draft first baseman because you're gonna have someone's bat who plays that cannot do the other thing, and you just stick him at first base.
Yep.
And that's why it's hard, because there's no other place to move them besides DH, and you don't want to do that.
For sure. Yeah. Pretty much first base, the defensive home. You've got nowhere lower to go on the defensive ladder, and I think that is the hesitancy, along with the track record, like Jeremy alluded to. All right, dude, we're getting close to 120, so we're gonna call it a day and end this hopefully successful first live streaming experiment. We will soon find out if it actually uploads to YouTube or not. Just closing with some housekeeping, some ways that you can support the show. We do have a Twitter. That's at DTS_pod1. Drop us a follow if you so choose. We have the live stream coming up on draft night. There will be a lot more details on guests, on the schedule, etc. All of that stuff when we're 100% convinced we have the TV schedule right. And we may be back for 2 episodes. If I can convince Jeremy, we're going to do 2 episodes next week. One with a guest who will keep under wraps for now until we get 100% confirmation. And then an entire episode breaking down the pitching demographics for the 2024 draft. So we will do a whole episode on college and prep pitching. We could literally spend 3 hours doing that. We will try and find a way to cram it into less than 90 minutes. Thank you guys for sending in the questions. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for checking out the show. We'll see you guys next week.